Hey, Darion, thanks for coming on Social Dream Machine. The show is dedicated to basically creatives making their first dollar online. It's great to have you on the show. For those people that don't know you, would you just mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, first off, man, thank you for having me. This is great. I'm looking forward to this. So, yeah, I'm a digital writer online. I do writing consulting as well as ghostwriting. I started as a copywriter and I was doing that for about a year and a half until I fully transitioned into content writing and then kind of just took it away from there, man.
Very cool. Yeah, I've been following you on LinkedIn. You're writing some cool content. I know that you're friends with Talon, and he's obviously, is it Talon Simmons? Is that his last name? I don't remember it. Yeah. So he's a great writer. But I've seen some of the content you're doing, and I know that you have some like collabs with him as well. So how did you make your first dollar, and like what was like how do you go about like looking at your business framework for the creator market?
It's been a long journey, man, and my mindset and sort of my approach to, online business and everything has changed, as I've evolved in terms of my knowledge and everything like that. So, my first dollar though was when I was still copywriting and I was hitting up Upwork every day. So for anybody who's listening to this, I'm sure you know the Upwork grind. And I was doing it actually a couple years ago. So it wasn't quite how it is now. So I don't want to say it was like less saturated because there were still a lot of people on it, but um, I was getting, I wouldn't say like every job I proposed to, but I was getting like a high response rate. And so yeah, this one lady from the US, she needed her a website video, like a welcome video, and she wasn't good with her words, so she just wanted me to write her a script. And yeah, it was cool. I just wrote her like a 300 like word script for her welcome video. I did some market research on her, and because she was in the beef jerky industry, and so yeah, so it took me, maybe like 2 hours to do some market research and like 30 minutes to write it, and she sent me $100. And I remember I remember just dancing around my room, man. Like, no lie. I was fist pumping. I felt like Tiger Woods, man. It was crazy.
No, I love it. I feel like it's like an unlock, right? When you that first dollar for whatever reason. And I'm sure you look at things differently too, right? Because obviously as creators, it's probably smart for us to, piecemeal work is good, but I think it's better like if we as we start becoming more seasoned, it makes sense to probably start creating like packages, I would think, right? Is that kind of how you look at things now, or how do you view like your model now?
Oh man, yeah, it's night and day. I mean, that was my first ever actual client, so I was just stoked to do essentially anything really. Um, but now like I'm actually running a mini group consulting cohort right now, and it's like a lot more bit like a business model, right? So I'm actually, there's I did like a whole launch for it to my email list and everything. So the way that I view everything I'm doing now is a lot more structured. It's a lot more business orientated. And I was essentially freelancing back then, right? I was just trying to get one-off clients. So there was no retainers, no contracts, no nothing like that. And but you got to start there, right? You just got to get some things under your belt. And I just got to say this because it's such an important part of the process. Is a lot of people, overlook the skills of talking to clients on the phone and getting on those calls and seeing what it's like to if she wants a revision and all these different things that you actually can't learn unless you do it. You can't read about it. You actually have to do it. And that's a huge part that I learned when her and I were getting on the calls. And she did say one thing, that was a really interesting revelation for me is I asked her a question about the copy that she wanted or the script. And she was just like, looked at me because we were doing a video call and she was just like, you're the expert. Like you do whatever you want. And obviously this is my first client. So I had severe imposter syndrome and she called me an expert. And I was just like, damn, like these people are really, coming to me because they can't do it. So even though I don't feel like I'm an expert, I know more than her. And it was just like this thing that clicked in my mind where I was like, damn, okay, like I can really do this, these people need help.
I think Justin Welsh calls this like knowledge blindness, where we have this thing where we have all this knowledge in our brain, but for some reason, like we don't feel like it's marketable for whatever reason. Like we don't quite have the value of it in our mind. And I agree with you. I think that you just need to be like a bit further ahead of someone. And a lot of the times too, I think people are looking for transformations. They're looking to be like So I like teach people how to podcast. So I'm going from like, non-podcaster to podcaster, or you could think of it in terms of like non-writer to writer or things of that nature. So I think that that's kind of like the way I look at that now. What about like, how do you go about like knowing like how much to charge, I guess, like as far as like, or actually before I go there, I wanted to ask you about your cohort, because me and my buddy are actually working on one right now as well. Putting together one like on how to like launch a podcast essentially. And with like, and we'll help them interview each other, teach them how to like reach out to each other, like teach them all the equipment, all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of what I'm working on with my friend, but I'm just curious, like, that's been a lot of work too. How did you go about doing that, and how is like the launch? How did it go?
It's definitely a lot of work and actually a lot more than I thought it was going to be. But I love writing. I genuinely do. So writing out all the pre-launch and the launch and the open cart emails was actually kind of fun for me. But essentially what I did was I sold directly to my email list. So I didn't even announce it on LinkedIn or through LinkedIn DMs. I was just strictly doing it to my email list. And essentially what I did was I did like a 4-day free workshop just to educate them on, certain aspects of what the cohort was about. So just to give you a quick rundown, it's essentially what I'm teaching them to do is most of the people I was targeting were already writing. So I didn't have to like teach them just how to write, because that alone could be a 6-month course. So, but we did cover writing. And then essentially what we were doing was setting up like an actual creator business, like a lead funnel. So we're optimizing their profile, teaching them how to write, teaching them how to like do a content strategy, and then from there a newsletter strategy, and then how to actually like network and send emails to get leads and stuff like that. So it was actually setting up a lead funnel, not just writing content.
So did you say you use Card to build the landing pages?
I did a 4-day sort of workshop, and it was just educating them on certain parts of what was going to be in the cohort, but also realizing that each time I would educate them, it would create a new problem, right? And so while I was educating them, I was also educating them on like problems that they have that they don't maybe know they have. And so that's how I segued into the like, hey, I'm doing a cohort to, help you with these problems that I kind of brought up. So it's just like kind of copywriting principles really. And so, yeah, after I did that, I did 4 days of like a pre-launch where I was kind of just doing testimonials, talking about, people I've helped in the past, and just hinting at the cohort. And then I did 4 days of an open cart where the doors were open, and just selling them and then closing the door on a Friday.
How long of a period was the actual like launch? It sounds like it was like a pretty short period. Was it?
The actual launch with the open cart was 5 days. There was 4 days of pre-launch where I was just hyping it, but the doors weren't open, so they couldn't actually like buy it. And then a 4-day workshop that was like I was saying earlier, just educating them, but also educating them on their problems. So all in all, it was 13 days going into 14 days with the final day.
And that's all you needed, huh? How many people, if you don't mind me asking, did you get signed up for? And if you wouldn't mind sharing the price point, if it's not too personal.
For this one, it was my first time doing it. So I was only opening 5 seats. I really wanted to keep it tight and intimate. I sold 3 out of the 5. And then I also had one person who wanted to just do some one-on-one stuff on the side. I was only, going for 5 because my email list isn't huge anyway. Like, I'm not going to lie. It's not like I got like a 20,000 list. So I was like, let's try this out and, see how it goes. And because it was a learning experience for me as well. And then the price point was, so it's a 6-week program and I was charging $500 per seat.
Out of curiosity, what did like the landing page like look like, the structure of it? Was it kind of like a hook and then testimonial and then rehook kind of thing? Or like, how did you look at that?
Because I was doing so much education in the emails and like selling directly through the emails, they didn't have access to the landing page until the open doors or open cart. When they went to the landing page, they were already like well educated. So I didn't actually have to like sell too much on the sales page. I was just kind of reiterating the outline of the course, the main problems, like that they have and what I'm solving and the transformation they're getting. And then at the very bottom of it, it was just like 7 solid testimonials from, people that I've actually got results for in the past, and then a final CTA. So it was very like simple framework. I had already done so much selling. So anyone who was hitting that link was pretty much
sold.
Yeah, like I wasn't trying to send cold traffic to this landing page. It was only people through my email list.
How long have you been writing, or how long have you been like working on your email list? And do you use like lead magnets to drive them? And if you do, like any ones that you've used that you liked?
I've been working on my list, like actually working on it this new year. Before that, I did have a market research manual that was like a free lead magnet that I was running. I wasn't really plugging it much. I was trying to grow more on LinkedIn, so I wasn't using my CTA for my lead magnet. But this new year in 2024, I was like, hey, I'm going to start taking, my business a little more serious and try to grow my email list and et cetera, et cetera. So I created a lead magnet is a 3-day content writing challenge. And so it's like a video tutorial. Essentially, by the end of the 3 days, you'll have a week worth of content. And I show you my writing systems, my ideation systems, and my editing system, one on each day. And the sign up for the lead magnet, I've just been plugging in my LinkedIn after my posts. And that started to really like ramp up my list.
What do you usually put in that post, like as far as like at the bottom in the comments, like sign up to my newsletter, we're X amount of followers type of thing situation, or how do you write that part?
I'm pretty much with that CTA. I'm just trying to highlight that it's free. It's 3-day challenge, so it's not too much of a commitment. And then just the transformation they're going to get, which is being able to write more engaging content online.
And then how much time do you like spend like making the actual thing? Because there's probably obviously like a balance, right, between spending too much time on something and just the right amount of time. Do you find like, how do you look at that? Do you just like write like a script or something for each day and then kind of just go for it?
It didn't take me very long because I was actually just sharing my actual writing system. So I already have them. I know them like the back of my hand. So I pretty much just wrote it out, gave them my templates, and then just recorded some Loom videos. And I was able to articulate it very well because it's, I do it every day. So I was able to bang it out in a few days, just sit down, get into, some deep work sessions and bang it out.
What other tools did you use for that, by the way, to make that lead magnet? How did you use like Google Drive or something to host it, or how do you do that part?
So I actually don't use Loom anymore. I switched to Komodo. It's really good. It's the free version actually lets you, for anybody who doesn't want to pay for software yet, it actually lets you record past the 5-minute mark like Loom does. The only issue, whatever you want to call it, is it only records for the free version up to 720 and not 1080p. But when you're typically, recording videos that are educational and stuff, you're just like a little circle in the bottom of the screen. So the resolution, people aren't really looking at you anyway. So yeah, I've just really enjoyed, Komodo. And then as far as hosting it, Notion, man. Notion is my go-to for everything.
Oh, does Notion it'll host it too? Like you could put video in there and you send the link and that's how it works?
I use Notion for everything. It's a pivotal part of my business. So, but yeah, it lets you embed videos. It lets you do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I use Notion too. I use Danco's planner in Notion every day. I love Notion, but I sometimes worry that I'm going to accidentally like delete one of the links by accident. I don't know if you have that concern, or I'm just kind of, I think that sometimes I just go into like a cleaning spree and I just start moving shit around, and it's probably not a good idea sometimes.
Yeah, no, man, I definitely, it's always in the back of the mind.
What are some of these cool tools? Because even like Dakota and Talon, I've seen write some pretty cool tools in Notion where they have some pretty interesting like frameworks kind of built in, like with like courses and things like that. Have you played around with that as well? Did you do that for your cohort?
I did my whole cohort in there. Like it's literally everything. And it's actually really straightforward for, the people that are in the cohort too. As you know, if you've been in Dakota's thing too, like it's so easy to just duplicate it into your own and have drop down menus, videos, like you can organize it, and it's like meant for that, right? It's meant for organization and stuff. So,
and then how often are you like selling like on the timeline, and like how do you view content? Do you kind of try to do like a trend post maybe that's for like growth, and then like one post that's like direct asking for business, and then one post that's like educational? Like how do you view like the content week?
LinkedIn and, X or whatever is going to be your top of your funnel, right? A lot of people there aren't going to know you. They're not going to really know what you do. So your content is going to kind of raise awareness. then they'll like either click on your profile if you like have an interesting post or you leave an interesting comment, and then they can get to learn more about you. And then that's obviously where you can try to get them to your newsletter. And then that's more where you're nurturing and selling. So I just view my LinkedIn content more as top of funnel, raising awareness for like me, what I write about, what problems I solve. And then I do most of my selling, well, actually all my selling, either in the DMs or to my newsletter. I don't think I've ever actually done a hard sell post on the timeline ever.
I think that it's okay to do them like 1 out of 7 maybe. And I wasn't doing them before because I actually, my old employer would get upset basically that I was like posting stuff about myself and like business that wasn't related to them. So that was a little bit of a struggle for a bit, but I since have not, I don't work there anymore now. So I don't have that specific problem anymore, which is good for me. But I think that it's okay just as long as you have like goodwill. Like if you're not constantly selling, I think it's okay. But because at the end of the day, if people don't know what you're doing, like how are they going to know, right? Like if you don't make it, I think the way I think about it is, if you don't make it extremely clear, like what it is, or like give people instructions, like how are they going to know, right? But I think that you view it like differently, it makes sense. Like you view it more like top of the funnel, and then they go deeper down the funnel as they get into your email list, essentially. What about like how do you think about like writing emails, like as far as like your topics and like how many words are you usually putting in a newsletter? And how do you think about like newsletter writing?
Every Thursday, I do like an actual newsletter, and it's called the Mindful Creator, because that's kind of my whole brand is about, mindset and content creation, but also just being a creator, like a creative person. So building that kind of stuff. So my Thursday newsletter issue is always either on mindset or like content or like creating. So writing, anything like that. And that is typically anywhere between 500 to 1,000 words. And then I'll do like 1 to 2 just regular emails throughout the week. And those are typically more story based, kind of personality driven type things. And those are usually like 200 to 300 words. They're very short. And so since I blasted my email list, with this cohort, I actually haven't sent anything out to them. I'm just giving them a little bit of a break, just because after like a hard sell, like obviously I lost some subscribers and stuff like that. So it's just like a matter of, like have you heard of the whole like hook jab thing from what's his name?
Is that Gary Vee or is that
Gary Vee? Yeah. So that's kind of like essentially what you were talking about with the, 1 in every 7 kind of thing, right? It's like value, educate, and then like sell. And then, so like, I'm just trying to make sure I maintain that healthy balance too.
I'm still like very green with my newsletter. To be honest, I only have like 11 subscribers because I just started it like, I don't know, like 2 months ago or something. And I haven't really been doing a good job of advertising it. I was actually just kicking myself because there's been like one post actually this week that was like a short that had like 19,000 like views on it that went pretty viral, I would say, for myself. It had like 6 reposts. So I was just like wanting to have that. Yeah, that one, it was rude because it had like basically a really good editor that was just doing like cuts like every second or two. So that made like the video, I think, kind of pop. And then I think it was also because it was talking about like borrowing authority, kind of like all of us do it, right? Like we go, oh, like I studied Justin Welsh's post and here's like 8 things I learned from all of his posts from 2024 or whatever, that type of thing. Pop with like a dope video like that's cut like will pop off the charts, because I think that like LinkedIn really is pushing the videos right now too, because they have that like video tab. So yeah, I definitely recommend that, because like doing what you're already doing with like the carousels and just recording like a video in like Riverside or something, I think that could be pretty cool to do, because I've been kind of experimenting with that a bit. But how do you look at like writing like news or emails or newsletters as well? Because I don't know, like I understand like social media writing because it's like quick and punchy and just like fast hooks or whatever, and just it gets to the point fast. It's like less is more kind of thing, and it's all about formatting. But email, I don't really like. Honestly, I don't really have a framework. I don't really understand it, to be honest, quite yet. Like, could you fill me in how you do it?
For my newsletter, essentially what I do is I go back the week before on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn's my main platform, and I look at I have Taplio. So what I do, one of my favorite parts about it is for your analytics, it shows you your engagement percentage on a post. So the reason that's actually so valuable is because you could have a post that gets like 20,000 impressions, but if it gets 100 engagements, that's actually not very good. But if you have a post that, gets, let's say 2,000 impressions, but it still has 100, that's like a high engagement rate. So that's probably something you want to look at. Like, what was the topic? What was the idea, the problem, blah, blah, blah. So I'll look back at my last week, the week before, and I'll take my top post in terms of engagement percentage, and then I'll write my newsletter on that, just going like deeper and deeper and expanding on the idea. Cause like I view top of funnel social media as just like testing ideas. So every single post that I post on LinkedIn is me just kind of like testing an idea to see like, do people like this? If not, like, okay, I'm maybe, won't write about that or whatever, right? Because at the end of the day, man, like the market is the one that, tells you what they want and what they don't want.
I actually, when I first started doing podcast coaching, like a little bit over a year ago, I gave it away for free, like for the first 2 slots to launch podcast. And I was terrified because I was like, what if like no one like wants me for free, then I'm fucked. So like, that's kind of like where my mind was at that time. Thankfully, 2 people like took me up on it and they ended up like doing like a review for me. I used like testimonial.io. They had this thing called like the wall of love. So that was cool that they like paid back like a review, which was cool. But it's like a weird thing where I think that I like the way that you said that. I think that like I look at LinkedIn as well as kind of like a testing ground, and I also feel like it doesn't hurt as bad. Like if like something tanks because you're just not really, I don't give a shit, not really attached to it, type of thing.
Most of like the real writing that I do for like me is like in my brain dumps and in my journals, and like everything I really post online is mostly for like my target audience or my niche, or sorry, my the market, right? So that's kind of just how I view it. Obviously, I take pride in my writing, but at the end of the day, it's not really for me. Because I was a copywriter like for over about a year before I started going into like content, I kind of approach it a little different in terms of the way that I structure it. So you could always go with like a pass, like problem, agitate, solution, or ADA. I look at, the market's level of awareness, right? So depending on the topic, it will change how deep they are in their level of awareness. And then I'll also look at my target audience's level of awareness, right? So for example, the market, like cheap dopamine or like dopamine detox, like that's been so abused in the market that their level of awareness is so high that the only way you could really write about something like that and actually not get an eye roll is to come up with like a unique mechanism or a interesting spin on the idea, just because it's been so used and abused, right? So I always start there, and then that will dictate how I write my headline. So typically most of the stuff I write about, their level of awareness is either problem unaware or solution unaware. So very top of funnel. And with that being the case, I'm a little more straightforward with calling out the problem in the headline, and then or the big promise, like the transformation or outcome they're going to get. And then the way that I structure it is like I'll do a lead. The whole point of the lead after the hook and the sub headline is just to build emotional investment. So I'll either tell like a emotional story that's relevant to the big idea, or you could do like an interesting statistic or something that makes people kind of go like, whoa, just a couple examples. And so the lead is just sort of like building that investment emotionally. And then I'll get right into like the big idea and then knocking out objections. So I would say 80% of my newsletter that I write is actually just like knocking out objections to the big idea. So if my big idea was like, hey, you need to spend 80% of your time editing over writing. Like, I don't believe that. I'm just saying that's the idea. Well, it's like, okay, if that's my big idea, what kind of thoughts are people going to be having that are going to object that? And how can I persuade them to see my point of view by handling those objections? Because essentially that's what great writing is, right? It's persuasive. So I'm pretty much selling you my idea. So once I bring up the big idea, I just knock out all potential objections to my big idea to persuade them like, hey, I'm right. And then I'll get into like the actionable part, solving the problem. And that's pretty much how I structure it, man.
I remember actually I learned from Dakota, and I just got like one last question for you and I'll let you roll. But I remember learning from Dakota Robertson this concept of open loops, like where it's basically, like opening this curiosity button in someone's like mind where you kind of like bring them in on like the action scene of like a movie, like right in the middle, and then you just pop that right into the hook, and you're like, oh, and I'm not going to talk about that for a minute. We'll come back to that in a second after. So you kind of like open this like intrigue in their mind. It sounds like that's kind of like what you're doing there. And then I guess my last question for you is like, how do you like look at like hooks and like intrigue and like open loops, those types of things to like create some sort of vision in someone's mind?
Realistically, man, there's so many different ways you could approach it. Are you familiar with future pacing?
I've heard the term. Is that where you like kind of like vision yourself like in that situation in the future? I do it actually, I think, with like manifesting. Like I had a picture of a house that I wanted to build behind me that made me like focus on it. So I would use it as a technique to try to manifest things, if that's what that is.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, yeah, it's foreshadowing in a way, but it's slightly different. So you would say something like, "Imagine this," right? And you're talking to your reader, and so imagine this. A year from now, you're making 10 grand a month writing content for clients. So now you're like setting this stage, but the real key to doing like future pacing properly is it has to be a desirable outcome or transformation that they actually want. So if I was like, imagine this, you have the best racing horse in the world, and they're like content writers, they're not going to care, right? So whatever that is that you're trying to get them imagine, it needs to be relevant to them. And so speaking of relevance, that's one of the biggest, things with hooks. And all my top performing hooks on my content have always been one of three things: either super relevant to who I'm writing to, my audience; curiosity driven. So there needs to be something that makes them feel like I need to keep reading this, because if they don't, why would they read it? Right? It's pretty obviously it's straightforward, and there's a lot of tactics we could get into, but essentially that's fundamentally what you're trying to get them to do, is be curious enough to keep reading. And then the third one is just somewhat emotionally driven. So that can be through a big problem or a big promise. So calling out a big problem is going to be, if it's relevant, right? If it's a problem they're actually experiencing, that's how you know that the hook is going to land, because who doesn't want a problem that sucks for them and to find the solution?
One last part of that question, just out of curiosity, you pressed my curiosity button, I guess. On that particular thing, like how long should the first sentence be usually too? Is it like just really quick, or like how do you view that, or does it matter?
I think it does matter realistically. And this is something that, Talon was actually, telling me about, is like the emotional commitment curve. And essentially what it is, the more well known you are and the more time people have invested in you, so watching your videos, reading your newsletter, the more they're emotionally committed to you, the more you can get away with longer writing and maybe less skillful writing, so to speak, or less tactical writing. So if you're like newer on LinkedIn and you don't have any followers, most people aren't, excited to see your name there, I would always recommend, shorter, punchier, to the point kind of stuff. But as you start growing and building that emotional investment from, your audience and stuff, you can get away with longer stuff, because they're going to see your name there, and that's what's going to sell them, not the writing, right? They're going to just say, like, you see Dakota Robertson and you're going to read it. You're like so emotionally invested in him, not emotional like in a negative way either. I'm just saying, like, he's done a lot for you. You respect him, you trust him, all these things.
It's relatable, is what it is too.
Yeah, and you're going to read it, right? So you see a name from somebody you don't know, and keep in mind, most of social media content is top of funnel. They don't know you. Like, you got to realize, like, they don't have that commitment to you. So I always recommend shorter, punchier hooks, either getting to the problem or the big problem or the big benefit or promise, and yeah, just sparking some curiosity.
I think that was a amazing, brilliant conversation. I appreciate you, Darion. Where do we send people? How do they find you on LinkedIn, and what is your website?
My LinkedIn is just Darion Rae, Darion Rae. And in terms of my website, I don't have like a personal website right now. I co-founded a engagement agency for bigger creators. So we handle all their inbound, outbound comments and stuff like that. So It's called Elite Engagements. So eliteengagements.com. That's really kind of what I'm doubling down on besides, my creator stuff. And yeah, I mean, find me on LinkedIn and all my other links are there. And then if you want to learn more about, mindset and not just that, but actual actionable writing tips and, just becoming a creator, my newsletter is also in my bio there.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the time. I appreciate you.
Thank you, man. Really, this has been awesome.